Most planes follow the rules. These ones rewrote the manual. From Cold War bombers turned flying labs to jumbo jets with rocket engines, these aircraft were pushed, stretched, and Frankensteined into something absolutely insane. And airborne. Here are the 10 craziest aircraft modifications ever made, because aviation engineers get bored too. Number 10, the Boeing 747 SCA, the Space Shuttle Piggyback. When NASA needed to move the space shuttle cross-country, they didn't call FedEx, they bolted it to the roof of a 747. Enter the Shuttle Carrier Aircraft, or SCA, two heavily modified Boeing 747-100s equipped with tail stabilizers, structural reinforcements, and more power than your average cargo jet. They added extra vertical stabilizers to handle the shuttle's drag and beefed up the fuselage to carry an 80-ton spaceship on its back. Despite its awkward look, the SCA flew over 223 missions, and one of them even conducted a free flight drop test of the shuttle. Aviation doesn't get more sci-fi than this. It's basically a plane carrying another plane to then go and launch space missions. Number 9, the Tu-95 LAL, the nuclear-powered bomber. Kinda. In the 1960s, the Soviet Union thought, what if our bombers never needed to land? Their solution? Shove a nuclear reactor into a Tu-95. The Tu-95 LAL wasn't fully nuclear-powered, it still used regular engines, but the onboard reactor was active to shield testing, crew safety, and radiation effects on aircraft systems. It flew 34 test flights, and the result? Horrifyingly radioactive. Engineers discovered that shielding the crew required so much rate it defeated the point, so if it ever crashed, catastrophic. The idea was shelved, but for a brief moment we had a flying nuclear experiment roaring through the sky. Science fiction? More like Cold War nightmare fuel. Number 8. The Super Guppy, aviation's flying blimpfish. Take a standard cargo plane, feed it nothing but steroids and helium dreams, and you get the Super Guppy, a Frankenstein aircraft designed to transport massive components like rocket boosters and entire airplane wings. It was built from a Boeing Stratocruiser, but stretched and ballooned to fit a 25-foot diameter cargo bay. The result? A bulbous flying machine that looks like it's perpetually struggling to stay upright. Despite its looks, the Super Guppy was a game changer. It could carry unbroken Saturn V rocket parts for NASA and reduce transport time drastically. Today, it still flies with NASA, because when you need to fly something absurdly large, ugly but functional wins the day. Number 7. The B36 Peacemaker with jet boosters. The Convair B36 was already a behemoth, with 6 rear-facing piston engines and the nickname 6 turning 4 burning after someone added 4 turbojets to boost performance. The modification came after they realized this piston-powered Cold War bomber took half a runway to get airborne, so they strapped on jet engines to help it climb faster and hit higher altitudes. It was the only bomber in history with 10 engines, giving it both intercontinental range and just enough power to carry nuclear weapons across oceans, albeit slowly and loudly. Imagine flying a battleship with afterburners. That's the B-36 after its makeover. Number 6. The Lockheed NF104A, the jet with a rocket on its back. Now this is what happens when a fighter jet dreams of becoming a spaceship. The Lockheed NF104A was a heavily modified version of the F-104 Starfighter, but this version wasn't just fast. It had a rocket engine strapped to its tail. Literally. The NF104A had both a standard turbojet and a rocket motor, giving it the ability to soar to the edge of space, reaching altitudes of over 100,000 feet. The cockpit was even fitted with reaction control thrusters because traditional aerodynamic controls didn't work in such thin air. Used by test pilots and astronaut trainees, this hybrid aircraft taught humans how to fly where planes weren't meant to go, and where control surfaces were useless. And yes, Chuck Yeager once flew it, but after pushing the aircraft to its limit during a test flight, he was forced to eject after a loss of control. The aircraft exploded and Yeager narrowly survived. It was a dramatic end to one of the boldest jet modifications in aviation history. Number 5. The F82 Twin Mustang, because one P-51 wasn't enough. What happens when you glue 2 Mustang fighters together? You get the F82 Twin Mustang. 2 fuselages, 2 cockpits, and enough firepower to make it a long-range escort beast in the late World War II and early Cold War era. It was born from the need to escort bombers deep into enemy territory, with enough fuel, crew, redundancy, and weaponry to go the distance. Each side had its own controls, but only one pilot flew it. The other was mostly there to help with navigation and communications, or as pilot joked, moral support. Strange looking? Absolutely. Effective? Very. The F-82 even scored the first air-to-air kill of the Korean War. Number 4. The B29 Fertile Myrtle, mothership for secret aircraft. In the 1940s and 50s, the US was experimenting with rocket planes, and they needed a way to launch them safely. Enter Fertile Myrtle, a highly modified B-29 superfortress used as a mothership. Her belly was cut open and reinforced to carry and launch the Bell X-1, the rocket plane that broke the sound barrier. Chuck Yeager famously dropped from one of these aircraft when he became the first human to break Mach 1. It was both absurd and brilliant, flying a plane to launch another plane at supersonic speeds. The B-29 was already iconic, but this mod cemented its place in aviation history. We've seen weird, we've seen wild, but the top 3? Oh, these mods push the boundaries of aviation, sanity, and budget cuts. Number 3, the MiG-21 Analog, Soviet jet with US wings. This might be the weirdest hybrid ever flown. The MiG-21 Analog was a Soviet experiment designed to test delta wing performance, using a Soviet jet airframe with wings shaped like an American F-16. Why? Because the Soviets wanted to reverse engineer potential NATO advantages without admitting it. The Analog was a one-off prototype, and it looked bizarre. A long, narrow MiG-21 fuselage with radically different wings, creating unstable aerodynamics. It flew, it collected data, it looked like something out of an alternate Cold War timeline. It did not go into production, but it showed how far both sides would go to stay ahead, even by stealing each other's homework. Number 2, the XB70 Valkyrie, supersonic bomber turned research lab. The XB70 Valkyrie was supposed to be the future of nuclear bombers, cruising at Mach 3 at 70,000 feet. Then it was canceled. Twice. But before that, it became a flying test bed. Its delta wings, drooping nose, and heat-resistant materials were all studied by NASA and the USAF to better understand supersonic flight. Only 2 prototypes were ever built. One crashed after a photo op. The other still sits in a museum, like an alien artifact from a timeline where bomber jets ruled the sky. It was loud, massive, and insanely fast. Also too expensive to survive the Cold War budget axe, but oh, it flew, and it was glorious. Number 1, the SR-71C Titanium Frankenstein. Everyone knows about the SR-71 Blackbird, the world's fastest air-breathing manned aircraft, but very few know about the SR-71C, the only one of its kind, built from leftover parts after a crash destroyed another airframe. It used the rear fuselage of a crashed YF-12, a Blackbird cousin, and the forward fuselage of a trainer version. The result? A Blackbird with personality quirks, alignment issues, flight control oddities, and an airframe that made mechanics groan. But it flew, and it still hit Mach 3+, despite being a Frankenstein of titanium, heat-resistant paint, and Cold War ambition. Only one SR-71C was ever made, and it looked like it knew it.